This is a Stanley No.120 block plane that I picked up at an antique store for $5. So what we're going to do is give it a nice sympathetic restoration and try a couple things. I've never tried nickel plating, so we're going to nickel plate the cap. Never tried Japanning, so we're going to try Japanning the body of the plane. So stick around and let's try those together. If you want to get into hand tool woodworking, you probably want to check out some antique tools. First of all, they're going to be cheaper and better built than a lot of tools today. There are plenty of really good tools being manufactured today, but they're not going to be at the same price point as these antiques. Now, you are going to have to put some time and effort into restoring them and tuning them up, but that's going to give you an advantage of learning your tool and learning how to maintain it so that it'll perform at its highest level. So, first of all, to take care of this one, we're going to disassemble this and get rid of some of the rust that's on it. All right, so it looks like the vapor rust has done its thing. And one of the nice things about this product is that it's reusable. I'm going to be able to pour this back in the tank and keep it for the next time. I use a funnel, and then I like using a paint strainer just to collect any kind of dirt or things that come off, just to keep it from back in there, a little less contamination. Now I'm going to put on rubber gloves, not because this is a harsh chemical, but it's just kind of got an oily feel that I don't like, so I'm just going to put the gloves on while I take these things out. Now, all right, so now we've got most all that off. I'm going to use a bit of a degreaser to just get the rest of this off. One of the things I like about a vapor rust, it does kind of leave a little bit of a patina to the steel. It's not a bright. I can either leave it like that and it would be very presentable looking, or I can polish that up a little bit. So let's get it cleaned up now and then we'll see what happens. But let's talk about this. This is the cap. And what's interesting about this cap is, while these aren't high-end planes, it's got some holes in the cap. Now, it looks almost like something's eaten through it. The problem is nothing else is really rusted except these two spots that are all the way through the cap itself. Now, is that a rust or is it a manufacturing defect? I mean, kind of doubt that Stanley would want to put something out with that kind of defect, but I just don't know. So what are we going to do? I could, if I was a good welder, put a drop of weld in there and grind it down and we'd be good to go, but I'm not a good welder. I could use some body putty and put in there, or some epoxy putty type of stuff, and I just don't want to do that. That just doesn't seem right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a technique that, there's a Japanese word for it, but out of respect for the language, I'm not going to mess it up. This is the word. And then it basically means to accentuate your defects, to take pride in your life, kind of bumps and grinds and things like that. So what they would do, and a lot of times, if a piece of pottery was broken, they would actually use gold leaf to edge it and bond it back together. In other words, just saying, here's the crack. This is what's wrong. I'm going to do something similar to this. I'm going to leave it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind all this stuff off of it, all the Japanning that's left. I'm going to get all that off. And then I'm going to nickel plate this, but I'm going to leave these holes. And then probably what I'm going to do is come back afterwards and paint or put some gold leaf or something down in that crack to just go ahead and say, here I am. But that's the next step. So we'll get to that in a bit. So now what I want to do first is I'm going to strip these off. I'm going to use some chemical stripper. A little bit of aluminum foil over top the pan will keep the stripper from evaporating as fast, so hopefully it'll work a little quicker. So, to make use of my time, while this is setting with the stripper on, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the knob. Now, rather than using a chemical strip on this, I'm just going to use a little bit of sandpaper. This is a 180 grit, and just kind of lightly sand the finish off of it and see where I get with that. All right, so let this sit for a while now. And I think we're ready to start seeing what's coming off. So now that I got the Japanning off of the plane, I'm going to take a little time and focus on the bottom, the sole of the plane. Now you want it to be flat. A lot of people will just go crazy and work to this thing till it's like dead on flat. And I'm of the opinion that that's not as important as having it reasonably flat. We're doing woodworking, it's not machinist work, so being perfectly flat may not be as important as some people want to think it is. So what I do is, I've got a granite work surface on my sharpening station. I like to take a piece of adhesive-backed sandpaper, lay it out on this. This is 220 grit. What I'm going to do now is run this back and forth, kind of get the scratch marks on the bottom to kind of give me an idea of how flat the bottom actually is. So we'll just start off with this. So I've spent less than 2 minutes going back and forth on this sandpaper to kind of grind this down flat. I wanted to get a scratch pattern on here so that I could see where the low-lying areas are. So there's a little bit of a hollow here because the scratch pattern has not affected that. And the little triangular shape right here in front of the mouth. Now this is the part that I want to make sure that's reasonably flat. And then up here at the toe, there's a place that's not been affected by those scratch patterns. So all in all, the sole is pretty flat except for those areas. This one probably won't affect much because it is flat here. So we want to see how much of an impact that little spot will be. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take a straight edge and I'm going to lay across the plane of the sole of the bed, or the sole of the plane. And then I will take a feeler gauge and see if there's any room underneath of that straight edge at any point. So it's going to look something like this. I'm going to hold this here and see if I can get that underneath the straight edge in front of the mouth. And it won't slide underneath there. So that spot right there, while it shows up as a little bit of a hollow, is less than 2/1000th of an inch. I don't think 2/1000th of an inch is going to affect my planing whatsoever. Before we get into this, I want to explain that we're going to go through the process of both Japanning and electroplating as I attempted it for the first time. So I can't guarantee that my processes are the best or even completely correct. But I did end up with fairly good results, so you might want to follow along. But if you do want to try this, make sure you do your own research before you're attempting any of these. Now, if you like this kind of thing, think about subscribing to the channel. And if you like this video, show your support by clicking the like. Now, if you find anything with these processes that you think could be better, please leave them in the comments and let us know. Now, let's get started on this. Now, to prepare the Japanning for the plain body, we're going to mix up the basic Japanning solution. The formula is 2 parts asphaltum, 2 parts of turpentine, and 1 part of linseed oil. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix asphaltum and the turpentine together, get those mixed, let them set for a number of hours to fully dissolve before adding the boiled linseed oil. So the whole thing's going to set for a long time, probably a couple days before I actually get into doing the actual Japanning, which includes a heating of the product. So we're going to start off with 2 tablespoons of the asphaltum. right, I'm going to let that dissolve for a bit, and then I'll come back to that in a couple hours and stir it again. Now, while I'm letting that Japan solution set and dissolve a little bit better, I'm going to go ahead and start turning my attention to the cap. So what I'm doing right now is I've got an angle grinder with a Scotch-Brite type of pad on it. This is a medium grit, and I'm kind of going over sanding out basically any of the bumps and things that will kind of make the nickel plating look bad. So I'm going to go with the medium grit, and then I'll do a fine grit, and then we'll buff it out. So now after grinding down the finish, buffing it on the buffing wheel, I've got it pretty much where I want it. I know that one thing with plating something is the finish on the plating is only going to look as good as the base of what you're plating. So I've spent a lot of time in buffing this down. I've got it where it is nice and shiny, and now we'll get ready to electroplate this. All right, so let's turn our attention to this little adjusting wheel. The Japanning has been taken off, and around the edges where there's kind of a little bit of a grip to it, there is a big mold mark and some pitting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to file down this mark here, the kind of mold mark. It stands proud, so I'm going to file that down, and then I'll just kind of dress up the edges a little bit and get it a little bit better looking and feeling. It's not hurting anything, but I think it'll look nice if I do that. Put this in the vise and just simply going to take my file and file that back. That pretty much hides that. So I'm going to go ahead and dress up this rest of these little notches, and then we'll get that cleaned up. Now for the nickel plating. 2 items I want to get plated, and I did a lot of research on how to do this. So this is my first try at it. I bought a small power supply. This is like 30 volts and 10 amps. I've got a little tub with a 99.6% pure nickel sheets. They weren't real expensive, but these will act as the anode. And then I bought some bright nickel plating solution for the solution that it's going to set in. Basically, it's just carrying the electricity from one to the next. The process is that the electricity is going to flow through the positive nickel anode and through the solution onto the part you want to plate that's connected to the negative. So this part, I've got the clip right on it, and I'm going to stick it in here, turn the power on, or I'll turn the power on, then put this in here, and then we'll let it do its thing. Now, I've already done one item, and I think by turning it and kind of moving it around a little bit, it kind of helps give it a little bit better coverage. Don't know if that's my imagination or not, but I think that worked better. So let's go ahead and try this. Okay, so the power is on. Let me also put my safety glasses on. That's probably a good idea. All right, so the power is on, and I'm going to just hold this in the solution. Now, immediately I'm seeing little bubbles form. And so as I'm turning this around, it is bubbling more on the side where the anode is. So I think moving around does kind of help. And that is getting some kind of plating going on it. So now, one thing I did not mention was the fact that when I was getting ready, I prepped these pieces. I cleaned them in the ultrasonic cleaner. I then scrubbed them down real good with a degreaser. And then I wiped them down with a pre-painting solution to just make sure there's no oils or anything on them. And then from the time I took them out of the ultrasound, I've kept rubber gloves on. I didn't want to touch it with my hands because I didn't want any kind of oil from my hands to get on them. So now it's a little dull right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to buff this up. All right, so now that I got that all buffed up, you can see that's a nice shiny finish to it. I had to clean a little bit of the buffing compound off of it, but it's got it down. And then you can also see the cap plate that I did earlier is also nice and shiny. It's got that beautiful nickel kind of look to it. Yes, there are some areas for improvement on how I do this. Like anything else, we're going to do it. It's going to get better each time I try and do it. So this step is simply painting the solution with an artist's brush, making sure you don't get anywhere it doesn't belong. Doing the Japanning was very rewarding. I'm really happy with the results. But keep in mind, this took a week to complete the solution, took 48 hours to ensure the asphaltum dissolved completely. The baking took a total of 6.5 hours to complete. It was a toaster oven, so I had to go back in every 60 minutes to reset it. It took a while, but you know, I did other things during that period of time. Then it needed a second coat, so it took another day to do that. I did like to check on it periodically, make sure the temperature was holding on the surface itself, and just kept on cooking it. Then the assembly was pretty simple. We inserted the pin that holds the blade adjustment. Now, then we had to put the crossbar back in. That had to tap in a little bit. I think it might have been some Japanning got in around the hole. Add the knob back on, and then the rest is just the blade assembly. So once I got the blade squared up and sharpened, it went together just fine. I think it turned out pretty nice. The defects show up, so I didn't do anything extra with those. I did add a little bit of a gold paint on the Stanley to make it stand out. And there's a little chip on the back here that I added some gold paint to it, just also to just kind of make it show up. The Stanley 120 was made between the 1880s and the 1940s. It was a mid-priced plane. I think this one probably dates somewhere around the turn of the century, around 1900. It, you know, was one of millions made. So it didn't have any great collectability, didn't have any real value to it. And the defects, of course, at that point in time probably even made it less. So once now I've cleaned it up and added the nickel plating to, in my opinion, the defects kind of add to the look and the beauty of it. I did have to buff the sides a little bit after the Japanning because it kind of discolored a little bit, I guess, from the fumes coming off of the curing process. I think it turned out really nice. However, the real test is it still a plane? Does it cut? Cuts pretty nice. Thanks for stopping by.